I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show. Thank you so much for joining us, folks. This episode today is brought to you by Unsmoke, but more on them a little later. So I am back in the studio, back after a week away. I was chatting with my producer. He asked me if I went anywhere or did anything for the week off, and I didn't. I just basically cleaned my house. I spent the entire week cleaning out all of my closets and my kitchen and everything. And for everyone out there who has kids, you know how much stuff you can accumulate. I've got 4 kids, and we just accumulate a lot of stuff. So it's good to every now and then go through and get rid of a lot of it. Okay, folks, I want to get into the meat of the episode today, which is that Mark Carney has put his elbows down. And let me just tell you that the elbows up movement, it was always a liberal political campaign slogan. It was a slogan. It was nothing more. The media created it. The Liberal Party created it. Many people in the country thought that it was some kind of a universal pan-Canadian elbows up, that we were all in it together. It wasn't. It was always a lie. It was always just about politics. And now we have it confirmed. So on Friday, Mark Carney, Prime Minister, announced that, yeah, those retaliatory tariffs, they're gone. We are removing them, and we are going back to basically what we should have been doing all along, which is trying to negotiate in good faith without slapping tariffs onto each other. So here is Mark Carney speaking in Ottawa, saying that Canada already has the best deal with the United States, and so we just didn't need the tariffs anymore. Let's play the clip.
Canada currently has the best trade deal with the United States. It's important, it's vital. We do everything we can to preserve this unique advantage for Canadian workers, Canadian businesses. I'm announcing today that the Canadian government will now match the United States by removing all of Canada's tariffs on U.S. goods specifically covered under CUSMA.
So we're removing the tariffs that we should have removed a long time ago. We're matching the United States, which means that they didn't have tariffs. So they're not really retaliatory tariffs, are they? If the Americans didn't have them on goods covered under NAFTA or USMCA or whatever you want to call it. But the idea here is that, and you know this, the audience knows this, a tariff, when they talk about tariffs on the Americans, what that really means is a tax on Canadians. Canadians pay the tax. Americans don't pay the tax, Canadians do. When US companies and Americans export things out of the United States and we import them here in Canada, we pay the taxes on that. So it's a win for Canada that we no longer have to play this silly political game where, partisan actors, politicians wanting to win elections make us pay a tax and make us cheer about it and make it seem like somehow it's patriotic and our duty to have these tariffs, which is really just a tax that we pay. So I guess we could be happy that that is over, but the politics of it is just despicable. Now, speaking in the Oval Office, President Trump expressed his satisfaction with Carney's decision. Of course he's satisfied. Of course he's happy because he's winning. He's winning this negotiation, and you can see it all over his face. Here he is saying that he likes Carney quite a bit. Let's play that clip.
Canada is taking away some retaliatory tariffs.
He's removing his tariffs, yeah.
Exactly.
He's removing his retaliatory tariffs, which I thought was nice. And we're going to have another call soon. Okay. Yeah, we had a very good call.
You're getting closer towards an agreement on trade?
I like him. We want to be very good to Canada. I like Carney a lot. I think he's a good person. And we had a very good talk yesterday, so I think it'll be good.
Again, folks, this should be good, right? Canada and the United States should be on the same team. We should be partners. We're friends. We're allies. We're neighbors. Everything about it should be positive. If Trump wants to reindustrialize his country and reinvigorate the working class, fantastic. Sign Canada up too. Let's do it side by side in partnership. The reason that this is so incredibly frustrating is because we just fought an entire election campaign based on a total lie, based on pure propaganda, a slogan that never really made sense, propagated by a bought and paid for media. It is just enough to make you go crazy. This is the state of our country. This is our country. We gave it away to the Liberals, again, based on a pure lie. Here is Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre saying the true things, that Mark Carney caved, that he made a series of concessions, that he got nothing in return. Let's play that clip.
I was happy to hear that he got the president on the phone. I know that Mr. Carney has been trying to do that now for about a month, and today the president accepted his call. And the Prime Minister took the opportunity to make a series of very generous concessions to President Trump. And I was expecting that when the call was reported that we'd find that President Trump had given us something in return, that Mr. Carney, being the negotiator he promised he would be, that he would get something after giving something. But not so. Today we learn that it has been yet another capitulation and climb down by Mark Carney. His elbows have mysteriously gone missing.
Polyev saying very many true things here. And folks, let's just get past one thing, okay? The whole elbows up thing, it's a hockey reference, right? When you're playing hockey, you put your elbows up in the corners like this, right? So to all the liberals that were walking around with their elbows up like that never made any sense. You're just showing that you don't even understand the metaphor. It never made any sense. And at least now we can put it to bed and move past and move away from the elbows up nonsense. Because again, if you voted for Mark Carney and the liberals based on elbows up, based on the idea that he was going to fight Trump, that he was going to negotiate a deal, that he was going to get something for Canadians and that he was going to punish the Americans, well, that didn't happen. That was never going to happen. It was never a line. Let me just remind folks, I know you in the audience, you were here for it. You never fell for the nonsense, but the legacy media did. And the people who watch legacy media, the people who watch CBC, CTV, Global News, everybody, they were all promoting this idea that Carney was going to he was going to win. He was playing chess and he was going to win and that he was going to get something in return. Juno has called it, right? From the beginning. This is back in March 28th. We put out a mini documentary about Carney and the many lies he tells. And the headline here, Eurasia Group president admits that Mark Carney will quietly fold to the Americans after the election. So yes, we dug up a blog post written by Ian Bremmer, the head of the Eurasia Group. For those who don't know, Eurasia Group is this sort of shadowy cabal consulting group led by Ian Bremmer. He employs Gerald Butts, Justin Trudeau's former advisor and best friend. He employs Mark Carney's wife. Also, he employs Evan Solomon, who is a Liberal MP. They all work for this group. Ian Bremmer wrote, I expect Ottawa will quietly fold shortly after the vote to ensure ongoing relations with the U.S. remain functional. Okay? So they said the quiet part out loud. They spilled the beans. They told us in the beginning that it was all a lie. It wasn't real. It wasn't true. There was no such thing as elbows up. We're going to quietly fold to the Americans once the election is over. Well, here we are, end of summer, quiet news days. Not a lot of people are paying attention to what's happening. And Friday afternoon, lo and behold, quietly fold. Carney quietly folded, just as Juno News predicted, just as Juno News reported, just as Ian Bremmer told us 7 months ago that this was going to happen. And it happened. Folks, again, the idea that retaliatory tariffs are gone isn't a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. I don't want Canadians paying these taxes. It's just that we were duped. The legacy media and the Liberal Party worked hand in glove, as they always do, to promote pure propaganda, and Canadians are worse for it. Well, the Juno News audience knows better, so we did a poll over the weekend, elbows up or elbows down. We asked our readers whether they agree with Mark Carney's decision to drop the retaliatory tariffs. 15% said yes, it was a good idea to drop the tariffs on the United States. 8% said no, we should keep those tariffs. I guess that's the elbows up crowd. And 77%, so the overwhelming majority of you, agree with me on this one, that it was a good move, but Mark Carney is still a hypocrite. All right, folks, happy to introduce today's guest, Wyatt Claypool, who is a political commentator and founder of the National Telegraph. Always great to have you on the program. Wyatt, welcome. What did you make of Mark Carney's Friday afternoon surprise?
Well, it wasn't as surprising to me just because we've actually seen this play out twice now. He got in on the elbows up agenda, as you've been talking about, and then he went a little softer when he came to the Oval Office and talked with Donald Trump face to face, which you would assume would be the time you would drop your own retaliatory tariffs and then you'd want to make a deal, and we didn't. And then right after we had that meeting, like a couple weeks later, we had the digital services tax issue where we tried to implement what was effectively a new tariff on U.S. big tech companies. that obviously caused the American negotiators to walk away from the table because even the Biden administration had been telling us not to do that. We had to rescind that to get them to come back to the table, and then we failed to negotiate. Like the readouts from people like Howard Lutnick and President Trump himself when they were talking about the negotiations with Canada, it sounded like we were just in the room and saying, "Hey, we're like PB&J, we are better together," and that's basically our negotiating standpoint, that we should just get along. We didn't put anything on the table. We didn't even make any demands or threats. We did nothing because even when Trump was asked, he said, "What negotiations? We're not talking about anything." And then now what we're doing, and this is why somehow Carney keeps triangulating himself the worst position on every issue. He's now gotten rid of the retaliatory tariffs just to get back to the table. We keep having to make concessions just to come back to the table. So it's the worst way of having to give something up. It's not even to get something done, it's just for paying the price of admission.
Well, it's pure posturing, right? Like even the digital sales tax, again, it's this idea that, oh, make the big American companies pay. It's like, no, those are going to be taxes on Canadians. It'll be Canadians paying those taxes for the services that they use in Canada, like Netflix, right? And the whole idea behind these tariffs was an election slogan. Like it's not like it's a smart group of negotiators thinking purely in regard to how do we reindustrialize Canada, how do we create more working class and middle class jobs, how do we reinvigorate our economy. It's basically, well, we have to win an election, and so how can we reverse engineer everything into a political war? We'll use the media, we'll create this narrative, we'll push pure propaganda, and as long as we win the election, we're happy. They win the election, and now they just have to basically walk it all back. I liked how Polyev mentioned that it took a month to get Trump on the phone, right? So it's like, to your point, that there's no negotiations, right? Like Dominic LeBlanc went to Washington, D.C., and I don't know who he met with. Maybe he met with the the Canadian ambassador or something. But like there was no one there to meet him. They were all in Europe negotiating their own different agreements. So it shows you what a low priority Canada is. What do you think?
Well, and the thing that we ended up having to with with the phone call. It was reported before Carney came out and said we're going to pull off the retaliatory tariffs. This wasn't a scheduled call. It wasn't something that both sides wanted. We effectively had to beg our way into getting a phone call with them. And again, we all we really did was again get back to the negotiating table. And you're right about Europe. Trump and the American negotiators have actually been getting really good deals where they are having guaranteed like buys of American products. That the Europeans and the United Kingdom are going to buy American oil and gas products to the tune of like 780 billion over the next few years. And what Canada's been doing is we show up to Europe and we just vaguely make deals about how we should maybe try and trade more. So at the start of this trade situation, this crisis, what happened is that like our exports to the United States have dropped 12%, but our exports to Europe or to elsewhere have only gone up 14%. But considering that that non-US trade only represented 20% of our exports means that we've only done ourselves damage through this. And it shows you're in a toxic political environment when during an election people are voting for elbows up when it has nothing to do with their own material well-being, has nothing to do with people who are not doing so well as material well-being. It's helping literally nobody, but you get to feel good when you put your ballot in the ballot box saying that you're sticking it to Donald Trump, who frankly is running the more powerful economy, and we're not going to be able to trip him up before we end up going down in flames.
Well, and it's so ironic, right? Why? Because the reason that Trump is saying complimentary things about Mark Carney is because Mark Carney is groveling and kissing up and kissing the ring. Like he's going out of his way to say really, really, really nice things about Donald Trump. And yet he got elected because Canadians really, really, really don't like Donald Trump, right? And so here he is capitulating and flattering him and saying that he's a transitional leader and he's this great thinker and all this stuff, even though his liberal base, they literally voted for the exact opposite of it. Okay, I want to get to another liberal lie, which is that we're going to cap our immigration and change course. Oh, well, the numbers came out and it's something totally different. But before we get to that, just a quick word from our sponsor. So it's time to modernize Canada's rules on nicotine. Alternatives to cigarettes like heated tobacco, vaping products, and oral smokeless products don't burn tobacco or produce smoke. They aren't risk-free, but the growing body of scientific research shows they have the potential to be substantially less harmful than smoking. Now, despite this, Canadians are banned from accessing critical information, and even some products, nicotine pouches, remain banned in convenience stores across this country. Current laws ban communication about the risk of these products compared to cigarettes. Look, folks, the evidence is here, the tools exist, and Canadians have the freedom to know more. We urge you to check out unsmoke.ca to learn more about this campaign. Okay, so Wyatt, we learned on Monday that the Liberal immigration numbers are worse than you thought. So remember last year when Justin Trudeau kind of admitted that they totally overshot, that the temporary reform program was out of control. He said that there were corporations taking advantage of loopholes and that they were going to cap the program. So they announced these caps. Well, the numbers came out. They proposed a cap of 82,000 on temporary foreign workers. In the first 6 months of this year, they've issued 105. Okay, you cap it at 82, you issue 105 in the first 6 months. That's not really a cap. Same with the International Mobility Program. It was supposed to be capped at 285, and they've already let in 302,000 people in the first 6 months of 2025. So Pierre Poilievre rightly called out the Liberals for overshooting their own immigration targets. What an absolute mess, right? Like they can't even cap immigration numbers, right? What do you think, Wyatt?
Well, and they're trying to be sneaky by instead of just only bringing more people in, they're also giving out generous amounts of visa extensions so that you may have come in as a temporary foreign worker 3 or 4 years ago and you're supposed to leave, but now you get to be here for 6 years. And that, I would consider that to be a new temporary foreign worker because the point of the program is temporary, that you are going to be here for a few years, you make some money, you fill in the gap in the economy, and then you go home. We're not even using the TFW program to fill in gaps in the economy. We're basically just taking away jobs from young Canadians. But regardless, you were supposed to do that for a bit and then leave, but now it's going to be perpetual foreign worker programs where you will never actually have to leave the country because there is always another renewal around the corner.
Well, and I mean, so the thing that the conservatives point out, rightly so, like they sound really good on immigration lately. I wish they took this hard-nosed approach during the election campaign, but they basically wrote in their release yesterday that that Mark Carney promised to fix immigration, but he's made it worse. He supports liberal, out of control liberal immigration policies that have delivered a triple header crisis in housing, healthcare, and youth unemployment. Right, and so it's like these things aren't going to just fix themselves. When you have millions and millions of people who have just come to the country and there's nowhere to house them, and our healthcare queues are already out of control. We did an episode last week with Colin Craig, who has an excellent documentary about how we could potentially fix Canada's system by looking at what Japan does. And then you also have this youth unemployment number. It almost seems like the Liberals have given up on these three issues. Like they don't even care anymore. And I think that the housing one is really tricky to fix, but the youth unemployment one, it's like the numbers are really bad. Young Canadians aren't working. They haven't been this high. That youth unemployment rate hasn't been this high since the 90s. And I never hear Liberals talking about it. I don't think it's a priority at all. What do you think?
Well, and the Liberals have kind of put themselves in a bit of between a hard like a rock and a hard place when it comes to their base that they're relying on for votes. This is also why they don't really want to solve the housing crisis because frankly the base of the Liberal Party is more is usually more upper middle class, usually a little bit older, and so you have a base full of people who already own their own homes, who live in the nicer part of town, who don't actually care about crime as much because, well, they don't live in that area. And then with the TFW issue with immigration in general, the thing is that the Liberals rely on a lot of votes where they have big businesses who want the TFW program in order to basically, sustain their company with lower waged workers, as well as they tend to do really well where there is a lot of immigration lawyers and scammers, and this becomes a part of the economy with fake universities and, fake front groups in order to be able to, generate the effectively what is becoming a human smuggling business. But the Liberals have staked out a very kind of weak coalition, and it's good that the Conservatives are actually not just saying we need it lower, because that was you're right. The Conservatives had a very weak position in the last election. If the Liberals are saying 400,000 and you're saying 250,000, strictly having one less than what the Liberals are doing is better than the Liberals, but it has to be much better to solve the problem. Because if we are driving towards a cliff at 100 kilometers an hour, I don't care if we're just ratcheting the speed back to 60. I'd rather reverse the car, and that's what Polyev is doing with the net negative migration promise.
Well, it's interesting because those issues, right? Housing, healthcare, and youth unemployment, they're all economic issues, right? And the conservatives like to stay in the economic lane because it's easier. But there's also a huge kind of elephant in the room when it comes to immigration, which is social cohesion and integration. And it's just not happening. And so there's a lot of sort of siloing off of immigrant groups. Like you drive around Toronto and it's like, one pocket will be like super waspy and kind of like Canada like was probably in the 1970s and 80s. And then you drive across one major intersection and all of a sudden you feel like you're in like in India or in China or in Korea. Like it's very, very siloed and balkanized. And there are a lot of social issues that come from that. Interestingly, the conservatives are starting to talk a little bit about the crime aspect that comes along with immigration. They sent out a news release just 5 minutes ago. Immigration status is not a get out of jail free card. And so they're talking about the justice system and that story of a non-citizen who got convicted of a violent assault, but then basically the judge let them off so that they wouldn't get, they let them off with a lighter penalty so that they wouldn't get deported. It's all kind of tied together in this mess that the Liberals have created. What do you think, Wyatt?
Well, frankly, I don't think the judge had to be too worried. Even if they threw the book at them, I don't think that the Canadian government would be competent enough to actually deport them. There are potentially hundreds of thousands of people who have overstayed visas who are now in Canada illegally, and we don't get rid of them either. But that is a great move. Like the thing is that the Conservatives' path to winning an election really is being tough on immigration, being tough on crime, and then substantially lowering taxes. Not like the last election, not again reducing taxes under $50,000, a little more than the Liberals, like a big tax cut that allows people to actually imagine how their lives would be substantially better once you implemented it. But and on this crime and justice issue, it just ends up touching on so many areas of Canadian life when it goes into both the cultural aspect that we're for some reason almost allowing certain communities to be more criminal, that it's going to then soak into that particular community if people just have the idea that you get a lighter sentence. It's what happens in the United Kingdom with Pakistani gangs, is that it basically creates its own culture that you can do whatever you want if you're a Pakistani man, because the law won't actually come after you.
Well, yeah, we've created a two-tier justice system where Canadians are the ones that get the harsher sentences and the harsher penalties and treatments. It's unbelievable. Well, some good news, Wyatt, which is that the Conservatives have retaken the lead according to the latest Abacus data polling. Abacus is one of the best, if not the best, pollsters in the country. And according to a newly released poll, shows that Pierre Poilievre has taken a slim lead over the Liberals, 41 to 39. If you look at the graph of committed vote intention, this is so disappointing and so sad, Wyatt. But you could see how the Conservatives had the lead in the polls going back to 2024. And, their lead ranged anywhere from 41% up to 47%, I think, at the height. And then right around the time that the election campaign started, Mark Carney was swapped in, the propaganda media did their thing. And for, I don't know, a couple of months here, you had Conservatives and Liberals neck and neck. And then now you finally have the Conservatives retaking and the Libs down to 39. It's so unbelievable, but it seems like perhaps Canadians are getting a reality call that really the biggest issue in the country isn't President Trump. It's actually cost of living and crime and all these other things that we've been talking about. What do you think?
Well, the Liberals started off after the election. Naturally, governments tend to poll better right after they're elected, because if you ask people, who do you think should be in office right now? They're going to be like, well, I guess the guys who just won should be the ones in office. That's why I actually preferred Prime Minister polling. Does not really work this soon after an election, because you're like, who do you want to be the Prime Minister? Like, well, I might be a conservative, but I'd hope the person who won the most seats is going to be the Prime Minister. But what this has been the result of, the Conservatives now leading the Liberals by 2 points, is just a cavalcade of liberal policy failures, of just stupid imagistic problems, recognizing a Palestinian terror state, the DST climb down on the digital services tax, you have the Air Canada fiasco, and by the way, this poll was actually started being conducted a couple days before the Air Canada fiasco, so the window of the poll didn't even fully capture how mad a lot of, NDP liberal switch voters got at them, and how a lot of people are probably going to go back to the NDP, but I think that Carney has just had so many small to medium-sized blunders that that for a lot of people who were willing to give them a chance, they're now pulling back. They may not even be voting Conservative, because the Conservatives in Abacus's last poll were at 40 and now they're at 41, whereas the Liberals were at 43 and now they're at 39. So we've had a 5-point swing. Most of the swing seems to have just gone with a bunch of people becoming undecided, not really knowing what they think about Carney anymore.
Interesting. And you can see back to the graph here is just that the NDP has still plummeted and have there's no dead cat bounce here. Like, they are down and they're staying down. I know they don't have a leader, but I find it hard to even imagine the prospect of a strong NDP right now, because the left is just so lost, right? They're like out in the wilderness. The issues that they prioritize are so different than the ones that prioritize for Canadians. I want to talk about the issues. So Abacus asked Canadians who they trust most on the issues. This is really interesting. Healthcare, majority or plurality, I should say, conservative. So 30% conservative, 28% liberal. Rising cost of living, thanks to the Liberals. 39% say conservative, only 27% for the Liberals. Housing affordability, Conservatives win on that issue. Crime and public safety, obviously, 61% say Conservatives on that one. The economy, Conservatives as well dominate with 45%. Interestingly, climate change, the Libs still have the advantage there, but I hate to break it to you, no one really cares about climate change right now. That's sort of a luxury issue, and when you can't afford anything and people are breaking into your house, you don't have the luxury to care about a hypothetical, theoretical change in the climate. The threat posed by Russia and China, Liberals still hold the lead on that issue. Inequality and poverty, people who put that first still go to the NDP. Indigenous reconciliation, Liberals win on that issue, but immigration, Chinese election interference, and job security and unemployment, Conservatives win on all of that. The only other issue that the Liberals still win on, again, is Donald Trump and his administration. I don't know why, because as we talked about off the top, that was all nonsense.
But there is something very key about the Donald Trump answer in this poll. If you go back to June 29th, that Abacus data poll, and this was still not its highest watermark, but we had 48% of Canadians putting that in their top 3 issues. And in not that long of a time, it's now dropped down to 38%. So we've had it drop by 8% over just 2 months. And so what we're probably going to end up seeing by the time the fall session ends up hitting, especially as sort of the trade issue develops, that Carney is signaling that Trump is not a threat to him, and actually our deal with the United States is the best in the world. And so what we're going to have is that the Liberals' biggest issue is going to start falling down the ranks, because there was the polling on who do you trust more on it, and then there's also how many people care. And right now, the top issues that people care about are all the ones that end up favoring the Conservatives. There is, the cost of living, and then there's Trump, and then there's the economy, and then there is, crime. Healthcare is kind of a bit of a split issue between the Liberals and the NDP. But as you go down, it takes a while for you to find a second issue for the Liberals after Donald Trump, and they can't play that card again. They've already played it, and now they've said that actually it's great to work with the United States.
Exactly. They've totally caved, and we should have known better, because we were saying so all along. Wyatt Claypool, thanks so much for joining us. Always appreciate your time and your insights.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
All right, folks, that's all the time we have for today. We'll be back again tomorrow with all the news. I'm Candice Malcolm. This is Candice Malcolm Show. Thank you, and God bless.